Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. This story comes from Belgium and took place in 2020 during COVID confinements. I was 20 back then, and at that time, because of the severity of the pandemic in Belgium, the law stated that you could only go out to practice sports or to work, so I took the habit of meeting with a friend to go out for runs and to practice all kinds of sports in general. Both of us were quite fond of urban exploration and knew a spot in the outskirts of Brussels consisting of an old sports and wellness center where we took the habit to hang out after our runs. To go into that spot, you must go through a hole in a fence on a street and then cross a small portion of the woods, and you'll come up on a football pitch and a tennis court, and up on a hill is the center, which is an old 4-story building, and the whole center takes a whole street block. On that day, we had just finished the 5-kilometer run, and then we went to our spot as usual. We were walking to the building since it was about to rain, when we saw 2 teenagers sitting on the roof edge, and I remember thinking that it bothered me since we were planning to go to the roof as well. So we went to the hall area to wait for a bit in hopes that the people leave. In the hall area, you have a clear view into the kitchen, which you must go through if you want to go to the roof. You can also see into another smaller hall and then into the dining room. My friend was rolling himself a cigarette while I was gathering 2 chairs and an office table for us to sit. Well, this next part gives me chills to this day. As I finished setting everything up, I remember starting to feel unwell, as I was being watched and not in a good way. That's when I looked at the kitchen and I saw, for a brief moment, a head sticking out of the doorframe and then staring right at us. It was a man. I couldn't say what age he was since he was all dirty, but the one thing that I remember is that he had an exaggerated happy expression on his face, like he had just found exactly what he was looking for. At that time, I just froze and I wasn't able to react bravely to the situation. I leaned slowly towards my friend, all while keeping an eye with the man, and told him very calmly that we had to go immediately. I tend to make lots of jokes to all of my friends, especially Sully, but when he saw the look that I had on my face when I told him that we had to leave, he didn't say a word. He just took his backpack and then stood up. We ran to the football pitch and saw the 2 teenagers were still on the roof, so we started to tell at them asking if the man was with them or if they saw him, but they just answered no to that, and that they hadn't seen anyone and that they had come by themselves. So, if someone was there, he wasn't with them. We told them that it was probably better for them to leave as well, since we didn't know what the man in the lobby was up to. They told us that they would be fine and that they would leave a bit after. We decided to leave since we had already told them what we saw, and we also had already been out for very long, so it wasn't very legal with confinement rules. And as we were walking towards the woods, I turned back and I could swear that I saw the silhouette standing in front of the staircase leading to the roof, but my mind didn't quite react and I just left alongside with my friend. I was so shocked that I just decided not to talk about it to anyone in fear of them not believing me or possibly making fun of me. My friend, Sully, is the only one who was there, and he didn't take a look at the man, but he is as scared as me just by seeing my own reaction at that time. I don't know what happened to these strangers. I found local articles and papers dating from that time about teenagers being chased by a crazy man in an abandoned building, but that information given wasn't enough for me to be sure if it was the same people and the same story. So once upon a time ago, when I just turned 18, I decided that I wanted to try out exotic dancing. All I had to do to get started was to get a pair of heels, and the only place to get heels was 2 hours away by car. Me and my friend, who was 17 at that time, drove the 2 hours to get some heels. We went to 5 different stores and really couldn't find the ones that I wanted. So we decided to stop at Wingstop to get dinner and then go back to the first store that we stopped at and get the heels that they had there. We walked into the Wingstop, and this dude at the front counter started telling us his life story, not leaving anything out, which was a little off-putting. He then asked where we were from, and we told him the county instead of telling him the exact town. He then proceeded to ask why we were so far from where we live, and my friend answered with, "Well, she's a stripper and she's looking for heels." To which I elbowed her in the boob for exposing me. The dude then proceeded to give us our food for free and then called his mom to see if she had any heels. He asked if we wanted to ride with him. We both said no, but he insisted. And I had just smoked some Zaza with my friend before going into Wingstop, so I wasn't really thinking. I thought my friend was coming with us, but we pulled out of the parking lot without her, which petrified me, especially when I realized that I left my phone in my friend's car. I sat in that car, as far away from him as possible. He pulled into an apartment complex and then went inside. He came back out 30 minutes later with a box of shoes. And on our way back, he proceeded to ask me if he could hire me for private dances. He asked what club I was going to work at, and I lied and I told him the wrong club. When we got back to my friend's car, he asked for my number. I was going to give him the wrong number, but he said that he was going to call it to make sure that it was the right number, so I gave him the right one. Then, he got in the back seat of my friend's car and tried to smoke Zaza with us. He brought his own, by the way, but I wasn't about to smoke someone else's Zaza when he was being that sketchy. So, I texted my cousin and I told him to call me and to tell me that my grandma was dying in the hospital. I know, I'm not proud of that. The dude then got out of the car and then went back to work, and my friend pulled out of the parking lot and then parked somewhere else so we could eat our food. Also, on our way home that night, we almost got into a head-on collision, but luckily, we survived. This happened to me a few years ago, probably back in 2017 when I was 14. I still think about this encounter almost every day. My dad lives near a small lake in Wisconsin, and there are only about 100 people who live in the neighborhood. My brother and I spent every other weekend up there, so we knew pretty much everyone. My dad's house was the second house to the top of this large hill. At the very top is a gas station and the diner where I would work over the summer, and at the bottom of the hill was the lake and a small beach. That morning I was waitressing at the diner, and at the end of my shift I bought a slushie from the gas station, and I was planning on going down to the beach for the afternoon. Parked outside the diner was a gorgeous teal vintage car. I'm not sure what brand, I'm not good with that stuff, but it seemed to be from the 60s and it caught my eye. There was an older man in the driver's seat and his wife in the passenger seat. They had their windows up and I wasn't too close, so I didn't get a great look at them, but I did notice that they were looking at me. I didn't think anything of it, and I started walking home. On my walk home, I remember wondering where they could be from. We don't get many tourists, and I would have remembered if someone drove a car like that. The diner was off of a pretty quiet highway, and it was rarely used by out-of-towners, but I assumed they were just driving through. My younger brother and I went to the beach that afternoon and hung out for a few hours. When we decided to head back home, I packed up my stuff, probably a minute before he did, and started walking home before him. On the walk up the hill, there was probably half a city block's distance between us. He could clearly see me, but we were too far to talk. I heard a car coming towards me and I looked back and I moved to the side of the street. It's the car that I saw earlier at the diner. They then slow down as they approach me, and I start to get nervous. The woman in the passenger seat rolls down her window, and I nearly shit my pants. They both seem to be wearing hyper-realistic latex face masks. There seemed to be no beginning and no end to the mask, and they weren't noticeable holes for eyes, yet their eyes definitely seemed real, and there was no seam at the edge of the neck. If they were wearing masks, they were some of the best masks that I have ever seen and must have cost a fortune. But it definitely wasn't their skin. There's no way. Something about them was just so off. The woman asked me for directions to a highway that I have never heard of. I didn't drive yet, so this in itself wasn't weird, but I pointed them to the highway by the diner that leads out of town. They then thanked me, rolled up the window, and then drove away. I ran to my brother and I told him what happened, and he said that they looked pretty normal when they drove past him, but they looked normal to me that morning as well. The masks were too good. You had to be close enough to notice how strange they look. There was just something so unsettling about them. They didn't really do anything odd except asking a girl who was clearly too young to drive for directions, but it was a very small community. I might have been the first person they had seen in hours, but it was just the way that they looked. I have never seen anything like it, and I haven't seen anything like it since then. I mentioned it to my dad when I got home, but he didn't have much to say about it. I still feel deeply unnerved when I think about it, more than 6 years later. I don't believe in much of the paranormal stuff, and I do think they were human. But why the mask? What were they doing there? And why ask a child who is obviously too young to drive for directions to a highway? Has anyone ever experienced something like this before?
This happened when I was a bartender about 4 years ago, but I think about it often as it has changed the way I operate throughout life. I now refuse to go to any store alone after midnight. For the story's sake, I will tell you that I was 25, attractive and slender at the time. On a busy Friday night, I was bartending with the bar manager and he had noticed that we were very low on some bar necessities after the dinner rush. So I was sent out to go to a 24-hour grocery store down the road to pick up the odds and ends that we were required to get us through the weekend. I picked up everything that was asked of me without trouble at the store, until I got to the liquor aisle. There were two country-looking guys there that were probably around my age in the aisle, and they were staring at me and whispering to each other in a way that made me uncomfortable, as I assumed they were making comments about me. All pretty innocent so far. Before they could approach me, I grabbed what I needed very quickly and power walked to the self-checkout. I really booked it out of there, because when you're a bartender, it's kind of like you are on stage and are required to be charming and interact with people that you otherwise absolutely wouldn't be able to tolerate unless you're getting paid to. I get to the self-checkout, and hot on my tail are the two guys. I'm scanning my stuff, and they use the scanning station next to me. I get a better look at them now that they are right next to me. One is taller, muscular, and average looking. The other is shorter and more plump. They both looked dirty, and their eyes were completely bloodshot. Not sure if they were high on something or had already been drinking for a while. They continued to stare at me, and our eyes awkwardly met, so I did the pleasant Midwesterny thing to do and flashed them a quick half-assed closed-lipped smile to be polite. The taller one starts trying to talk to me. "Hey, looks like you're ready to party, huh?" I replied with something like, "Yeah, something like that. It's not for me though." They walk closer to me and ignore their responsibility to scan their items. "Oh, must be for your boyfriend, huh?" I flash the awkward, tight-lipped smile again and roll my eyes slightly, like, "This is your hint that I'm not interested, fellas." The taller one continues to try to talk to me. "You could come hang out with us tonight. We could show you a real good time if you know what I mean." I reply with, "No thanks, I'm good. I have plans already." Well, the tall one starts to get upset that his moves aren't working like he'd hoped and starts using a more threatening tone and moves very close to me. Like 2 inches away, but I ignore him, staying focused on the scanner. I don't think he had showered in a few days by the smell of him. He gets a little louder and says, "I see how it is. You probably only fuck doctors and rich men like that. You think you're too good for us? We can show you that you aren't. We can teach you a lesson." Now, I'm not sure in what context he meant, but it definitely wasn't good. Still not looking at him, I turn away so my body is blocking his view of my purse, which I set on the scanner, to grab my 4-inch pocket knife out and slid it up my jacket sleeve in case I need to protect myself, acting like I'm searching for my wallet. I do this, however, in view of the self-scan worker standing at her podium, and I look at her with wide eyes, trying to communicate that I do not feel safe, and I might need help. I turn back to the machine and slid my card to pay while the creepy and hostile guys are practically standing on top of me. The machine malfunctions and starts beeping. The lady worker comes over immediately, and the guys standing next to me change their expressions from "I am planning to torture you for a couple of days and toss your body into a creek" to "just your friendly, good old country boys making polite conversation over here." They actually tried to act like I knew them and we were friends, so the worker wouldn't be alerted to their ill intentions. They tried joking with the worker, saying I was stealing something and that's why the machine went off. The worker was definitely not buying it. She was a 6-foot+ tall woman, with some muscle on her by the way. I wouldn't mess with her on my best day. Anyways, she presses a few buttons on the screen, shooting the guys a very unimpressed look when they were trying to act charming, and cancels the order completely. She turns to me and says, "I am sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am. This machine seems to not be working correctly. Why don't you gather your things and I will ring you up at an actual register?" She puts her hand on my back and gives me a wide-eyed look like I gave her a minute earlier, letting me know that she sees I am in danger. I pick up my things to follow her to the register that is near the security office. The guys linger around the self-scan, still glaring at me, and eventually complete their purchase but stand at the exit, assuming they are waiting for me. I felt like I would be walking to my death if I made my exit in that moment. The worker keeps a close eye on the guys and scans my items. As she's scanning, she tells me there really wasn't anything wrong with the machine I was using. It just misread my credit card. She said, "I had a bad feeling about those guys from the moment they walked in, and then I saw them getting aggressive towards you. I already rang security to be ready to walk out to the parking lot and make sure you left safely when you were ready to leave. Then I saw you take that knife out and put it up your sleeve, getting ready to protect yourself. Good girl. As much as I'd like to see you show them that they picked the wrong girl to mess with, I'm glad I was able to pull you aside and make sure you are safe. I see them waiting by the door for you. I'll just keep pressing buttons on the screen and act like I am having trouble with your order until they give up and go outside. Our security officer and I both are still going to escort you to your vehicle when you leave." I thought to myself, this woman seriously deserves a raise. I thanked her over and over again and told her what they said to me. I was getting afraid because I don't know what these guys are capable of. As I'm talking to her, my bar manager calls me to see what's taking so long. I explained what was happening, and he was obviously very concerned and ready to come up there himself and kick some ass. By the time I hang up, the guys had given up and walked outside to the parking lot. The worker said to give it another few minutes because she had a feeling that they may still be in the parking lot waiting for me to walk out and see which vehicle was mine, so they could follow me. My instant thought was, no way, they have to be gone by now. I was wrong. The worker and security guard escorted me out, and as it was after midnight, you can imagine how empty the parking lot was. Towards the back of the lot, there sat an old big pickup truck running with the lights on pointed towards the store. It was a huge parking lot, and it wouldn't have made sense for them to initially park like that. So I'm assuming they moved the truck to sit that way so they had a full view of when I exited the store to go to my vehicle. It was like being stalked by very hungry lions. When I unlocked my car, they saw that me, the worker, and the guard were looking directly at them, and that I wasn't getting in my car until we watched them leave. They then peeled out of the parking lot. I mean, they seriously did a burnout to establish that they were pissed and trying to intimidate us or something. Aw, poor creeps didn't get their way. Boo-hoo. I thanked the worker and the guard over and over again, as I am certain they had just saved my life, or at least saved me from having to live with whatever those guys were planning on doing to me. I did write a long letter to the store manager and to their corporate location describing how their employees protected me and how grateful I was. I really hope that earned her a promotion, bonus, or raise. She didn't know me at all and was ready to protect me, which really isn't her job, but she did it anyways. Needless to say, I do not go late night shopping by myself anymore. Never will again.
This seems like the right place to tell the story. It happened back in 2013. It was about 8 to 9 o'clock, and I was on my way home from a pal's. I was sat upstairs at the back of the bus. There was only me and one other person on the top floor of the bus, and he was sat near the front on the opposite side. When I got up to get off of the bus, I walked from the back towards the stairs, and he called me. I don't remember exactly how he asked, but he was asking for a lighter. I walked up to him going through my pockets, and I told him that I had matches, and I handed them to him. He took them off of me and just stared at them for a good few seconds. He then handed them back to me and said something along the lines of, "Don't worry." The time it took him to decide not to use them felt very strange to me, and the eye contact before and after just felt intense. I walked down the stairs thinking, what the hell was up with that? And then I got off the bus. I told a couple people how weird it felt and described what he was wearing. He was wearing a zip-up black hoodie with a knockoff Hardy-style tiger on the chest. Well, fast forward about a week, and there's a fatal stabbing on the bus in my city. A young girl on her way to school was stabbed to death on the top deck of a bus. Stabbings are pretty common in my city, but a young girl being killed on her way to school, well, that's big news anywhere. They show a photo of the suspect being arrested, but you can only see the back of his hoodie. And straight away, I think that's the exact same Ed Hardy knockoff, and then I start wondering if it's the guy that I had seen. When they released more photos of him from the front, I knew it was him. The scary thing is, it transpired that he had recently been let out of a mental health facility, and he hadn't been given any support and had been sleeping rough on buses. I have had many interactions with mentally ill people and dangerous individuals, but this is one that stays with me. Even though the interaction wasn't much, it felt so strange. I always wonder if he was seeing how I reacted when he asked me, hence why he didn't use the matches. Who knows? It's just a sad story, really. Rest in peace to the poor girl who was murdered. Her name was Christina Edkins, and she was only 16 years old. Last year, I moved to another city after finishing high school. I assessed several college options and then decided on one that would have me move roughly 3 hours. I found an apartment where I would be able to live without any roommates, and that was in a safe part of town with a reasonable rent. It was also close to some attractions in the city, which was an added bonus to me, as it would still allow me to have a reasonable social life. For the first 4 months or so, it was great. There were absolutely no problems or safety concerns of any sort, and I managed to become good friends with a guy who studied at the same college as me, who, coincidentally, lived around 5 minutes away from me, so we would often hang out at each other's place. One night, just as winter started, he called me over to play video games and hang out, and we had a pretty chill night. We drank a few beers, had a good few laughs, and then enjoyed ourselves. At around 1 a.m., we decided to call it a wrap, and I headed home to my apartment. When I got back home, I decided to head out to the balcony that overlooked the entrance of my building to smoke a cigarette. I vividly remember looking around and seeing absolutely nobody. It was a cold winter night and it wasn't the weekend, so understandably, everybody was at home. Besides the usual car or two passing by, it was dead quiet. Once I finished my cigarette, I decided to call it a night and I got ready for bed. I was understandably confused when I heard a short ring on my doorbell. I stood in the center of my room for a solid few seconds as confusion and a little bit of fear set in. I snapped out of it and I decided to tiptoe to my door to just try and hear if anyone was outside. My immediate thought was that my friend came over to drop off something that I might have forgotten at his place, but I thought to myself that he would have texted or called me. I probably listened for half a minute or so when the person once again rang the doorbell and then softly knocked on a few times. I was stood still and I didn't want to make a sound so that I wouldn't give away the fact that I was at the door. I heard the stranger pacing around the apartment for a few seconds before he stopped. I waited for any sort of noise, but it was just quiet. That was when I decided to look at the peephole to see that he hopefully had left. I picked up the cover of the peephole and I took a look. My legs pretty much went numb as I saw a hooded figure looking straight into the peephole. He was holding the zipper of his hoodie so as to cover his face, and all I could really make out was his forehead and eyes. He must have either heard me lift the cover or my heavy breathing, because right away he moved from the peephole and I said, "I know you're at the door." By this point, I was pretty much shivering in fear, but I mustered up the courage to say, "I'm calling the cops, man." He then laughed and said, "Sure thing, big guy." He then proceeded to wipe away the door handle with his sleeve before walking off. I understandably called the police, and when they came over, they informed me that I wasn't the only one. He had been doing this for at least a month, and they suspected him of at least one home invasion where a father chased him out of the house. I crashed at my friend's house for around a week or so after this before going back into my apartment. It's been a year, and I have never heard of any news about him. He could have been arrested by now, but as far as I know, he hasn't been. I find it more likely that he simply moved to a different area. I'm not sure if he had any violent intent or not, but either way, let's seriously not meet again. I was a 20-year-old college student, and my friend and I were living and working near her college for the summer. A guy she worked with invited us to a party at his place. The two of us went, along with 3 other friends, and we turned out to be the only females at the party. There were at least twice as many guys there. After drinking and playing a few drinking games, people started to leave. A large group of guys was invited to another party and then left to go there. And then our 3 other friends decided to go too. It was down to the host, my roommate, and then 2 other guys. For some reason, maybe we ran out of alcohol, I can't remember, we decided to go to this other party. I had a few drinks, but not enough that I was seriously impaired. My roommate though, she was pretty tipsy. She was walking with her friend from work, and the other 2 guys who had been talking to me at the party were walking close to me and talking to me. At one point, my friend and her coworker were walking far enough from us to be out of earshot. The 2 guys told me that they knew of a shortcut and tried to get me to follow them down a dark alley. I told them that I wanted to stick with the group. They tried to persist for a few minutes, but I was adamant that I not be separated from my roommate. Somehow, mysteriously, we never found the party. The details are a bit fuzzy, but I think that they couldn't find the exact location. This was in the mid-1990s, so no one had a cell phone to call or text to confirm a location. My roommate told her coworker that she wanted to walk around to find another party because she wasn't ready to go home yet. There were lots of people out, and often you would run into someone who would invite you somewhere. I told her that I just wanted to go home. I was desperate to get away from those guys. My roommate was feeling good and just not having it. The 2 guys started to whisper to one another, but I was able to hear some of what they were saying. One said, "No, didn't you hear what she said? They live with 4 guys." This was true. We had 4 male roommates, which at some point had come up in the conversation earlier. This immediately set off more alarm bells. I continued to argue with my friend, and eventually she realized that we weren't going to find another party after all. The 2 creepy guys left, and her coworker walked us home. On the way home, I told them that I wanted to leave because those guys were scaring me, and why. If this were to happen now, I would call those guys out in front of everyone and make a scene. This encounter happened a few months ago. For context, I'm an 18-year-old male, and I live about 1.5 kilometers away from a shopping center. The route I take usually requires me to turn 2 corners and then walk straight for the rest of the journey. Although pretty early on in the walk, There is a tall apartment block to the left of the pathway alongside the main road. I would say it has about 4 or 5 levels. I live in a shady area, and previously, the apartment block had a case of a stabbing that killed a woman a year before my story takes place. I witnessed the cleanup crews hosing the area down when that happened. This caused me to be pretty wary of the area in general. On this day in particular, I needed to go to the shopping center to pick up a couple of supplies. I noticed that as I started walking the pathway of the straight road, that the sky was pretty dark. It was early in the afternoon, so this meant that a storm was on its way. Not a drop of rain fell as I made my way to the shop. And once I had arrived, I picked up what I needed and I went window shopping for a while. When I was satisfied, I exited through the door that I had originally entered, and then I began walking back home. I made it to the final set of traffic lights. That was probably a 7-minute walk away from my house. Then the rain started to trickle at first, and then after that, it poured pretty heavily. 3 minutes later, I could see the apartment block about 20 meters ahead to the right. The rain was still pouring down, and so the visibility wasn't that great. But what I could make out was a man in a dark green poncho. He had the hood of the poncho over his head and also a big grin on his face for some reason. As I got closer and closer to him, I didn't like the feeling that I was getting. He reached his arms out almost as if he was attempting to bring me into his embrace, keeping that same smile that he had before. The man was a 5-meter distance from me when I took the opportunity to cross onto the median strip of the main road. I noticed his glance followed me as I crossed into the middle grassy patch. Even though there was no traffic, he decided to not chase me down and continued walking along the pathway as he kept eye contact with me. The thought of what might have happened if I walked into his arms still frightens me to this day. Even if he didn't mean any harm and was not trying to grab me, I still didn't like the vibe that I got from him. And when I reached the middle of the road, I felt safer and relieved, especially considering that he didn't attempt to follow behind me. Hello, my name is Alex, and here's my story. At that time, I was in my old bedroom, which was basically one of the smallest rooms in the house. I am now in a new bedroom, and this one is way more spacious. Maybe my room was about 5 meters by 5 meters, and it could only fit a bed, 2 nightstands, and a dresser with a mirror screwed on top. It was in the basement. Now, most of you guys probably think a basement is dark, creepy, and eerie, but mine was not. My parents made sure to make it as full of life as possible. They painted the walls, installed a gaming room, which I used often, and basically making it really cool if someone in our family wanted to have a party there. And now, the room I had, I think it was actually fair that I had that one room, because before we moved houses, both of my brothers had to sleep in a tiny bedroom, about 5 square feet large. Basically the worst, and I had the biggest room in the whole house. So, at that time, we had 3 cats. One died later on after what I had lived, but that's not really relevant to the story. One of the 3 was my favorite. I loved her, and I took care of her, and she made sure that I wasn't depressed. Sometimes, we would just let her go outside during the night, and I would let her go in sometime when she scratched on my window. I was an insomniac, and I never slept well. My parents knew about it, so they decided to get some melatonin pills to help me sleep. My window was on the top of my bedroom's wall, which meant that my cat didn't need to hop on any type of ledge or border to scratch with her paws on it from the outside, letting me know that she wanted to get in. It was a night that I decided to take some melatonin pills, which work fantastically when I couldn't sleep. And so, I was literally about to sleep, like I was on the edge of dreaming, when I heard my cat scratch. Or so I thought. I sighed. I got up to move my curtains out of the way so that I could let her in. But when I opened my window, I heard something move or step on the rocks that were around my window. At that time, I was too sleepy to realize that it wasn't a cat's footsteps that I heard, but a human. So, as a normal person, I yelled my cat's name and I put my hand out of the window to tap on the ground as to let my cat know that she could come and get in. That was my mistake. In no time, I heard footsteps coming straight to the window, and I felt the man's hand grab my arm and start to pull me out of my window. I started screaming for someone to come and help me, but nobody came. I felt the adrenaline instantly rush to my body, and I quickly grabbed the sharp object. I believe it was a dirty knife covered in old food, and I stabbed the guy's hand. Blood dripped out of it as I heard a blood-curdling scream, the scream that I would remember my whole life. The man quickly ran away as fast as he could, and I fell back on my bed, opening my door and running as fast as I could upstairs to my parents' bedroom to tell them about the horror story that I just lived. They woke up fast and called the cops, reassuring me that I was safe and everything, caring for my horrible wound, the man's grip on my arm. They arrived at the house and I told them what happened. I was still under adrenaline, so my words were not sounding very clear. With the man's blood that was on my knife, they managed to get his name and where he lived. They followed up on us and told us that he got arrested for attempted kidnapping and that he already got a charge with many other crimes before. I am still traumatized to this day. I have been a long-time reader of this subreddit, so it is honestly kind of surreal that I now find myself writing about an experience that I had very recently. It was a Friday night, and I had gone to bed early, as I had work on Saturday morning. After reading in bed for a bit, I drifted off at around 10:30 p.m., only to wake up about an hour later to loud screams and people yelling profanities. I thought my girlfriend was watching a movie with the volume way up, so I went out into the lounge room to ask her to turn it down a little. But instead, the TV was off, and my girlfriend was staring at the front door with her eyes wide. Our apartment is on the ground floor of the building, and so our front doors open directly out into the lobby of the building. The voices in question were coming directly from the lobby, and I could not make out specifics, but there was a lot of swearing. In my defense, I was half asleep, and the language of the country that I live in is not my first language. My first thought was that it was some kind of domestic dispute, but after listening, I realized that it was a group of men that sounded extremely aggressive. I looked at the WhatsApp group chat for my apartment building, and to my horror, I saw a message from one of the people in it that there were armed men in the building and that we should not leave our flats. The country I live in is experiencing a marked uptick in crime, and I had heard stories of armed groups of men robbing entire apartment blocks. But these had seemed fairly apocryphal to me. However, that was my first thought, that these men would kick down our door and then rob us. One of my dogs started to growl at the commotion outside, and I shushed him, and thankfully he obeyed. I heard a commotion in the apartment above me, and I went out to my patio to see what was happening. I heard what sounded like a large piece of furniture being knocked over, and women and children screaming in terror. At this point, I had no idea what was going on, but I knew that by now they would have robbed us already if that is what they had planned to do. My girlfriend and I decided to hide in a small shed at the end of our patio, monitoring the group chat on our phones. Our bigger dog silently stood watch outside of the door of the shed, and his eyes locked on the sliding door at the end of the patio. I would find my smaller dog later, cowering between the washing machine and the dryer. After 10 extremely tense minutes, I heard the screeching of tires, signaling what I hoped was the perpetrators fleeing the scene. Eventually, someone in the group chat said that the police had arrived, and we breathed a huge sigh of relief, and I came out of hiding and opened the front door. Alarmingly, on the floor of the lobby, there were zip ties that had been cut, and the security guard was talking to one of the tenants. The man was bleeding from a large gash on his face and looked extremely shaken. Over the next few hours, the story would unfold. The man I saw with a gash on his face was the tenant in the upstairs apartment, the one that I had heard the commotion coming from. He was the owner of an import/export business, and for whatever reason, had a sizable sum of money in cash hidden in his apartment. Someone had obviously found out about it and planned out the robbery that woke me from my sleep on Friday night. A group of 8 men had followed him into the apartment building's garage and then ambushed him as he got out of his car. And judging from the gash on his face, they roughed him up a bit. Some of the group of 8 had gone to the lobby, surprised the security guard, and then zip-tied him. And the remainder of the group had gone up to the apartment, robbed it, and then fled the scene. It is fairly chilling to think that armed men were mere meters from my front door. So, to the armed men that stormed my apartment building to steal my neighbor's cash, let's not meet. This happened to me when I was a teenager, some years ago, but I still think about it sometimes. So, me and my 4 friends were on this 1-hour bus ride to go to my parents' house to hang out. We were sitting and chatting in the back of the bus. The bus is empty except for us and this middle-aged man sitting a couple of seats away from us. He looked like a normal businessman on his way to work or something, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. But after a while, we noticed that he was behaving kind in a weird way. He was chugging down beers rapidly, which is not that common on the bus, and also, it was in the middle of the day. He was also pretty openly flipping through a porno magazine and kind of muttering to himself. Okay, weird, but we didn't really get too bothered. But after a while, he starts approaching us, sitting closer and small talking with us a bit. He was asking how old we are, where we're headed, and so on. We kind of just reply politely but try to end the conversation pretty quickly since he's creeping us out. Apart from the beer drinking and the porn magazine, you can really sense something is wrong with this guy. He's grinding his teeth a lot, and he has this blank stare like he is looking right through you, and he's not really there, you know? When we stop talking to him after a while, he just sits there silently and then stares at us for a while, breathing heavily like he's getting more and more agitated. And after a minute or so, he suddenly leans forward and then pulls down the sleeve of his shirt. On his arm He has three big pairs of sharp-looking scissors duct taped to his arm with the sharp end pointing up towards his hand. He's stretching out his arm and making sure that we all see the scissors, and then he says, Does this make you respect me? Am I getting your respect now? We just sit there with our mouths open. I'm scared as shit, not really sure what to say or do, and just panicking because I'm not sure what this guy is capable of. And after a moment, he leans back again and continues staring at us, not saying anything more. And we don't say anything either, afraid of setting him off, I guess. Well, we get off the next station, all jittery and full of adrenaline after that weird encounter. If I wasn't a clueless teenager, I would have called the police at that point. But we didn't, and I still think about it sometimes and wonder what a guy like that, who is obviously unhinged, is capable of. And if he ever did something worse than just scare some teenagers by acting crazy. My auntie owns a local diner in the middle of a small town where everyone knows everyone. And recently, she had almost half of her waiters quit within a month, which she knew about but didn't tell me why when telling my mom this, and I overheard it while doing homework at the dining table. Then, she asked my mom if my two older sisters could help out, but my mom said that the oldest is moving out of town to live with her fiancé, but agreed to let my second older sister work. Then my auntie asked about me. Mind you, I'm a 15-year-old girl, and the last thing on my mind to do after school is going to work, even just for a few hours. Even if I find time to get home in the evening and then finish my homework, I still wouldn't like the idea at all. My mom was quiet for a little before agreeing, since even I know that money is a touchy subject. Ever since my dad divorced my mom, I was chosen to stay with my mom 100% because my dad is an alcoholic and often liked to hurt my mom and have done some nasty things to my sisters and I. I don't know where he is now, probably in jail or married to another poor woman who will be his next victim, but that's partially the reason why we were struggling when it comes to money. Fast forward a week, I went to school on a Wednesday morning like normal, except I had to pack a set of extra clothes in my already stuffed backpack. My aunt talked to me and told me that I have to wear a uniform, and she doesn't want my mom to know what I wear. She wants me to put it into my backpack instead of going to school in it. She even said that she can wash it every week since it'll probably smell like eggs and other diner foods. I usually take the bus to school, so days that I work, I would take another bus that dropped me off about a 2-minute walk away from the diner. The bus driver really didn't care about if we got off on unusual stops, or maybe they had no idea and were just working for a paycheck, much like I'm about to do. And at each end of my shift, my auntie will drop me off back home after I change back, of course. Once at the diner, I would go to the back through the kitchen, which had 2 chefs who work harder than any cook that I have ever seen, and right to my auntie's office. There, I could see her computer on a desk and a whole lot of paperwork, some clothes all around, and it's just a total mess. My outfit is basically a button-down white t-shirt and a white miniskirt and one of those tiny aprons that only cover from waist to crotch area. I kind of like the way this fits on me, but the fact that I'm wearing all white means that I'm going to get dirty maybe every single night. My sister has a similar outfit, but her skirt is longer since she sometimes does shave her legs or something. I just know that I don't have the same issue she has. The first night went well, actually. I got a lot of people looking at me funny and asked if I'm a kid, to which I told them my age, and some of them were upset that a kid is working. Some were happy that they think that I'm trying to help the family business, and some were just weird and happy to just see me. Whatever the reason it was, I just like talking to people, so this was super easy. Plus, most of them didn't mind if I would bring out one plate at a time instead of like 5 or 6 like pro waitresses. But Friday night comes around, and this is the night that I finally meet the guy who's one of the main reasons why those other waitresses quit. My auntie really wanted me to meet him since he's in about 3 or 4 times a week and orders a good portion. His name was Larry, and he seems really nice and friendly. He even treated me more like a friend than a waitress. I would have me sit down with him while he told me stories about how he fixed cars, his travels for work, eats at every restaurant ever, and stayed at every hotel in the world. I never told him my age, but I'm pretty sure that he can tell that I'm a minor. Often enough, he sits at a booth in the corner of the restaurant, and he would ask me to sit beside him so he could kick his feet up on the other side of the bench, which I don't really mind. But it only started to get weird when he would poke one of the buttons hidden from my apron and think it's my belly button, and then ask if I had an outie belly button and if I'm ticklish. I do in fact have an outie belly button, but I didn't tell him that. I would just fake a giggle, and sometimes I would feel his hand brush up on my chest, which I don't care much of either. But there was a few times that I felt like he was feeling my chest for my nipple, which I still don't know why he would want to see them, since my chest is still pretty flat. Again, I'm 15, and I know that it will grow. Sometimes, he grabs my arm or my thigh, and then he gives me massages, which really don't feel good, and if I tell him that I don't like it, he just tells me that I will start to like it. Usually, after every visit from Larry, I would make up a dozen excuses that I needed to go before he would accept and then let me go. I didn't mind anything weird about Larry. He seems innocent enough, like a grandpa who just wants to spend time with his grandkids. But I really wish I wasn't chosen to babysit him every time he comes here. And since he spends like $100 a week here, my auntie tells me to just ignore and let him ramble on, since he's the reason that this business is still afloat, which are my auntie's words. I'm pretty sure $100 a week cannot cover the rent alone. After about a week of seeing Larry almost most of my shift, he came in with his laptop and showed me his Facebook and told me to look myself up so we can be friends. I seriously don't want Larry in my life 24/7, so I just lied and I told him that I never made a Facebook. He simply laughed, thought for a second, and wrote my whole name out in the search bar. For a second, I was so shocked that I turned pale, even for my light skin. I had a name tag, but only my first name. But my stupid sister probably told him our last name when he asked. She may be older, but she doesn't act like it. He found a picture of me and sent a friend request, to which my phone goes off, making Larry laugh, and my heart dropped into my stomach. He sent me a few messages just to hear my phone go off a few times as I pulled it out and fake laughed before swallowing the throw up in my mouth. He then proceeds to go through my gallery, which my Facebook is public, since I was pretty stupid enough to want to make as many friends as possible, much like Instagram, and try to gain as many followers. He found pics of me that I wish he wouldn't find and could comment on how my clothes are too revealing and that I should take these pictures down. He commented on my friends and how he could find me a good set of friends to be with, to which I had no idea who he's referring to since he told me before that he has no kids and he lives alone. Then, even seeing pics of me with my belly button revealed and comment on my outie belly button and poke my belly again. I could really feel his finger trying to find my belly button again, which just felt so disgusting that I just got up without a reason this time and I just stormed to my auntie's office. I confessed everything to her and told her how disgusted I am. And at first, she seemed to be on my side, but when I explained the things he did to me, she quickly changed sides and told me that I'm just over-exaggerating and he's just treating me like a kid in a friendly way. I wanted to burst out crying and ask my sister for help, even wanting to talk to my mom about this and confess it all. But my sister calmed me down and told me how Auntie would have to let us go. Then, we wouldn't have enough money to keep our apartment, and then we'll have to live with Dad. I have no idea if this were true, but the things my dad did to me are in fact worse than what Larry had done so far. So fast forward a few months to present day, I still work at the diner and still see Larry on an almost daily basis. He still acts the same and once in a while touches me, but it's gotten to a point that it's nothing too concerning, like my chest or thigh, which I still don't care about too much. I only care when he tries to touch my belly button or nipple. I know that for summer, Mom will make me work, and because of my age, I legally can't find a job anywhere else. I'm pretty much okay if I have to keep working for summer. The only good thing about Larry is that he would often order twice in one sitting, which made Auntie very happy, and I would get a good tip because of it. I guess if you have advice, then I'll take it, but I don't think that getting rid of Larry will be of my best interest, since I've read too many creepy stories of stalker situations, and trying to escape the creep only makes things worse. But also, Auntie probably would fire me, and Mom would be upset. If I reveal all of this to Mom, this would only make our family situation much worse, since my mom relies on Auntie way too much. But either way, it feels good to share this. I feel like just talking about it makes me feel better, and reading other stories make me feel like I'm not alone, and maybe I'll find help in the best way. I might be in this situation for a while, but sharing it relieves some of my stress. Thanks again for listening. If I have any updates, I will post them here. This happened around 2021 in India, around COVID period where lockdowns were still very much effective. My dad used to live in another city, my brother was in college, and my mom had a government job, so she had to go to her office every day. So, I was basically left alone from 10 a.m. to around 6 p.m. We used to live in an apartment unit, but it had two doors. One was the main door, and the other one was located in the biggest bedroom, basically my parents' room. The door was clearly locked with an actual lock from the outside, but it also had a metal sliding door, the one with the chain structure, and it was also locked from the outside. We had a ring bell on the outside, but it was just connected to a small bulb in the bedroom. So, one day at around 12 p.m., I was in my room, which was basically adjacent to my parents' room, and I felt, I don't know, weird. So I just went to check their room. I went to the room to see the bulb blinking, which meant that someone was ringing the doorbell. My mom used to say to just ignore it because if it was someone we knew ringing it, they would know the real door. I stood there for a moment when the person started knocking really hard on the door like it was straight up rattling. But the thing was, due to the metal gate in front of it, it would be very hard to put your hand inside to knock at the actual door. Even I couldn't put then half of my palm on it. And this man was straight up banging on it. I got scared and I called my mom, who told me to not panic. But I was really weirded out, so I locked my parents' door with the lock that they had, and I went downstairs to chill in my brother's room. It was one of those days where my mom straight up wouldn't return like till 8 p.m., so I was alone for a long time, and I was scared to even go upstairs. Around 6 p.m., our helper auntie came, and I was a little better that someone else was in the house. And during that time, I used to take private classes, and my teacher used to come around at 7:30 p.m., so I really felt better that I'd be having people. Our main door had a big window just beside it, so whenever someone was at the door, we used to open the window to check who it was before opening it. But Auntie had the habit to open it without checking. Like, you memorize the timings of people, so you just open it because you know that it will be them kind of thing. Fortunately that day, when the doorbell rang, she opened the window, and then she came to my brother's room to tell me that I had a cake delivery. The thing is, I didn't, obviously, so I went out to check through the window. There was a man with a cap hiding his face, holding a very small box. Now, a cake box is very square and big, right? Even a pound cake has a big-ass box. And in India, we have a very small sweet box, so imagine a 100-gram sweet box being called a cake box. And I asked him who was the delivery for. He didn't give me any name, not even of the company. He just told me that it was for our flat. I called my mom and asked if she had made the delivery, and she didn't know what I was talking about. So the dude was like, just accept the box and open the door. And by a miracle, my teacher walked up the stairs and asked what was happening. The dude saw my teacher and he ran up the stairs, and we let our teacher enter. Later, when my mom inquired about a delivery guy coming to our flat with a security guard, he said that he wasn't there at his post for around half an hour when it happened. And we didn't have any CCTVs in our building, so no one saw him. It wasn't that scary, maybe, but it did shake me up, and I asked my mom to at least come quickly from her office on the next day. And I didn't stay upstairs when I was home alone. For a little bit of a background, I'm a 24-year-old female who loves scary stories, horror movies, true crime, and etc. It takes a lot to scare me, though I haven't actually experienced many terrifying, life-threatening events, fortunately. Now, on to the story. This was during the middle of August in North Texas summer 2023, so the nighttime temperatures were around 100 degrees. My dad and one of my brothers, who's 11, drove an hour north into the countryside to go stargazing for my brother's Scout merit badge. There are some twisty gravel roads in the forest as you approach Black Creek Lake. We got to see a coyote, a deer, and 2 raccoons. We live in the city, so we don't often see such animals. We thought that it would be our excitement for the night. We then finally made it to the recreational park grounds beside the lake. The layout is simple. If you're standing in the round parking lot, then the campgrounds are to the north and west, and the lake is south, and the path in and out is east of us. There are no official campgrounds east of this recreational area, which is important for later. We got there at around 10 p.m. and then we set up. We were able to successfully see some stars through my telescope as well as Saturn, which was really exciting for us. And throughout this whole time though, there were 2 parties, or what might have been one group, in the parking lot and a surrounding nearby area. One party was kayaking and then later fishing from the boat ramp area west of us, and to the north in the lot were two cars. From that direction, we were constantly hearing a loud, irritating voice of a woman who was obviously in a bad mood and didn't want to be there. She continuously cursed at someone or no one in particular, and at one point was mad at someone for taking her keys and obstructing her from driving, which obviously made it sound like she was drunk or under some other influence. At one point in the night, at around 11 p.m., we hear someone loudly, sporadically honk one of the car horns over and over in random patterns. Then, we hear the obnoxious woman rudely tell someone to wake up over and over again, then proceeding to hold down the horn for a few seconds at a time, and then continuing her assault on the horn in our ears. By this point, my family and I are just about ready to leave due to this loud commotion. I personally was fixing to go over there myself and tell her off, but I knew that probably wasn't the best idea. I definitely didn't want to put myself and my unborn baby in any danger. But then, for about 20 to 30 minutes, we were able to watch the stars in relative peace with little noise coming from the other two parties. Fortunately, none of these people were directly involved with what happened next, but it may have been the cause of it. Just before midnight, we packed up our stargazing stuff and got in the car. Now, the gravel path to exit is up a slight hill or slope, meaning for the parking lot, you can't see past where the path goes up and around a couple trees. We drive up the hill, and just as the headlights came back down to illuminate the path in front of us and the trees to our right side, it was right then and there that we see a man, wearing only black shorts and no shirt on. The timing was straight out of a horror movie to just suddenly see someone out of nowhere. He was in his late 20s or 30s and had short, dark hair. And just as the light hit him, he was standing and walking right there, just to the right of our car, in front of us at a very close distance, only a couple of feet away. The guy had been walking towards our direction, and upon seeing us, quickly raised both his arms to flip us off with both hands. He keeps his hands and arms raised, and is quickly and loudly saying something to us with anger or something in his voice. We couldn't understand what he was saying though, since we had the radio on, and all of this happened quickly. The second the man saw us, he started walking toward our car faster. My dad was driving slowly initially to avoid the agitated man, thinking that he might need help. My dad in a confused voice says, What is he doing? But I just reply with, Nope, go, go, go! And then we sped off. I knew that this was not a situation where we needed to stick around and ask questions. It freaked me out a little imagining what would have happened if the guy had reached the car a few seconds later if we hadn't sped off. I'm not very familiar with my dad's car, and it scares me that I might have ended up pressing the wrong button to unlock my door, and the guy could have opened it and done who knows what. We left and never had anything else happen, but we did wonder who that guy was and where he came from. The direction he was walking from had no official campgrounds, only the forest. Maybe he lived in one of the scattered houses in the woods that we'd passed by on our long journey. I wondered why he had been walking in our direction toward the recreational area. My best theory is that he wanted to confront the group that had been honking the horn and waking up the entire forest, but upon seeing our car leave, maybe he thought that it had been us making the racket. Even if that's not it, or the man needed help, which is not likely considering his reaction to us, I couldn't help but feel a sense of danger. I hope that no harm came to those other two parties. that night. First of all, this is the story of my worst hitchhiking experience. This incident was sketchy as fuck, but I still wouldn't give up my love for hitchhiking. I'm a 21-year-old man from Finland, and I was 20 at the time of the incident. Anyway, to the story. This happened on the 2nd of December last year in Kalamata, Greece. I had been hitchhiking for quite a while at that point. I had started from Budapest, and I had hitchhiked through 7 different countries with only positive outcomes. The story begins at around 11 a.m. on Saturday. Some hours before I had woken in my hammock hung up behind the castle ruins, in the only place that had trees that weren't someone's olive trees. I was tired from the lack of sleep caused by the cold night and early wake up by noises of the busy market across the street. After a quick tour of the town and some breakfast, it was time for hitchhiking. I made a sign with the words Athens and Sparta in Greek, and I was standing by a road leading to a roundabout where the first exit goes towards Areopoli, the second towards Sparta, and the third towards Athens. A lot of cars drove by, but nearly all of them took the first exit. It took at least an hour for the first car to stop. It was this small, quite old, worn-out white car, and driving it was an older guy around 60 who looked like a little dirty. He had greasy hair, some teeth missing, and a big nose filled with visible blackheads. He didn't really speak English, but I could understand that he was going to Sparta. I was a bit frustrated by the fact that pretty much all the cars were going towards Areopoli, so I thought that this may be my only chance, and I jumped in. We are trying to have a conversation, but without a shared language, it isn't really possible. We introduced ourselves, and I try to explain where I'm from. He smokes and offers me a cigarette too, but I refuse. We drive just shy of 6 kilometers before the guy suddenly makes a left turn and we end up in his yard. He stops the car, gets up, and signals me to follow. So I do. I take my bags and I feel a bit confused. It's a small house on the mountain surrounded by sheep and olive trees. There's a dog sleeping in the sun, but it doesn't seem to be bothered by us at all. We walk to his balcony/terrace that surrounds his house, and I put my bags inside of his house and I join him sitting on the balcony. He lights up another cigarette and asks if I want to eat something or maybe take a shower. I refuse, and with the help of Google Translate, I ask why we aren't going to Sparta. He answers that I can sleep at his house and he'll drive me there tomorrow. I try to explain that I would like to get to Sparta or even to Athens today, so staying at this place isn't really an option. I'm pointing out that there's not that many cars going past his house, like maybe one every 15 minutes, and only some 4 to 5 hours of daylight left, so every minute is valuable to me. He doesn't really seem to understand me, so I just get up. I walk through the door to grab my bags. I put my backpack on and pick up my other bag, and I turn over and see him inside. I try to walk out, but he stops me and then guides me to the side. He locks the door and then turns to me. At this moment, I'm not panicking or anything because I assume that this is a form of hospitality and he's just doing this jokingly to maybe offer me some food. I keep saying no to him, but he doesn't care. And now, he is standing right in front of me, and I'm starting to feel very disturbed by his presence. For some reason, I keep staring at his blackhead-filled nose. The image still haunts me. He opens his mouth, and raises his right hand in a loose fist in order to show me some blowjob motion. I'm still saying no to him, but he suddenly grabs me by the crotch and I can feel this cold tingling sensation shivering through my body as my hair stood on end. I kept saying no and I start to raise my fist in order to hit him. He stands like this for a couple of seconds and thank God he lets go. I'm still feeling the urge to hit him, but I don't. He asks, "No sex?" And I almost shout, "No!" at him in a tone that makes it sound that I'm questioning the question itself. So he opens the door and I'm free. I walk out feeling so fucking creeped out by this experience. I walk past the dog to the road and I see two pickup trucks on the other side of the road. The trucks are surrounded by a group of hunters carrying shotguns on their shoulders. This makes me instantly feel a lot safer. I keep walking by the road for a while before a car passes me by. It's quite warm and I'm in the middle of nowhere, so I empty one of my water bottles and turn it upside down, showing it to the cars passing by so they would think that I'm out of water. This works and the second car stops. I get to Sparta and later that day to Athens safely. But I felt disgusting until I got to take a shower. All the kindness that I had experienced while hitchhiking before this event had made me too comfortable, and I had let my guard down. I think humans are good by nature, but probably trusting every stranger is a stretch. Stranger danger is still overrated though. Additional notes. 1. I'm quite a lean guy, not that strong, so I was lucky that the situation didn't end up worse. Though, I think I could have beaten that also very lean shepherd grandpa. 2. As a safety measure, I carried a knife with me, but it wasn't on me at that moment of the incident. Also, the knife could have made the situation worse. Obviously, I wouldn't have stabbed him unless it wasn't necessary. Number 3. My mind was running like a million miles an hour during and after this experience, and I thought about how everything could have turned out in the worst case. I also thought about beating the guy, telling about the incident to the hunters, and calling the police. But I ended up doing nothing and just walking away. I hope karma gets to him eventually. And lastly, after this experience, I still think hitchhiking is the best way of traveling. So, to that sick fuck of a person, let's never meet again. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared, because your fear feeds me.